We pulled it off. We got it on time. It happened. We didn't have a password reset issue. Everything was smooth. Excited to see you, sir.
Hey Ryan, hey Andrew. Andrew, last
Hello.
time we did this, we had a password reset issue, and
Oh,
I was like 10 minutes late to the stream.
yeah. The irony of password resets in our lives is never ending, and
Yeah,
eventually that will go away.
yeah, it will. I have faith. I've made it my life's mission. I just
Yes.
I thought about it recently. This is the longest job I've ever had, and it's probably been the singular, like most career-wise focused thing I've ever done,
Yeah.
which is weird to think about. Um, and so, hopefully the legacy will be a positive one.
I think it will. Yeah, we're grateful for that.
Yeah. Quick intros. Thank you all for joining in. Boyan here with my co-host Ryan, um, and we have a special guest today, Mr. Andrew Shikiar, who is the CEO of the FIDO Alliance.
Thanks for having me. Always good to chat with you guys.
Yeah, and we're here to drive some momentum, shine some light on some of the recent statistics around phishing attacks and the importance of passkeys, and also super important announcement regarding the Authenticate conference, uh, which is in a few short weeks. So, Andrew, do you want to give a quick pitch on Authenticate? Because it is an amazing conference, and the location is probably my favorite location I've ever been to of any conference ever. So, give it the quick pitch.
I love hearing that. So yeah, Authenticate is FIDO's annual conference where people can come learn the ins and outs of all things authentication. Obviously, a very close focus on FIDO and passkeys. This is the second year in a row that we've held it at the beautiful La Costa Resort and Spa in Carlsbad, California. So a little bit north of San Diego or a little south of Orange County, depending on where you fly to. It's a wonderful place to hang out with a bunch of authentication identity nerds, which is awesome. It's a beautiful venue, but really, most importantly, it's a great conference. We've grown this over the years from just a idea of kind of expanding what we used to do with 1 day seminars into a multi-day event. This is now a 3 day event where we also have our member plenary. Our member meeting happens plus an added day on Thursday for the members. But the content's fantastic, and we have a program committee who whittled through, I think, hundreds of submissions to speak and narrowed it down to something around 70 or 80 different sessions spread over 3 days. Registration is looking great. We're up around 30% from last year. So I think anyone who's coming in person can expect to be surrounded by 650-ish people from all walks of life, from all industries, with a common focus of learning how to move beyond passwords. One last note on this. It's not just for the FIDO pros. So one of the questions we ask all registrants: how much do you know about FIDO? Are you new to it? And each year we have around 30% of people who are kind of new to this, which is awesome. So whether you are a FIDO newbie or a FIDO pro, please be sure to come to Carlsbad, California for Authenticate.
Yeah, I remember when we were there last year, and you asked the audience like how many are first timers, and it was 70% of the room.
Yeah.
It was a huge number of first timers, people learning. So it was amazing to see, and I'm really looking forward to our time in Carlsbad together.
Yeah, it's going to be great. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, with that, let's jump into the topic of the session. So today we'll be talking about combating the 856% increase in phishing incidents, specifically with passkeys. And so we'll talk today about some of the questions that we've received over the last few days and weeks around this topic in particular. Actually, much of the HYPR team was in Vegas last week at the Falcon conference, which CrowdStrike puts on every year, and the interest in identity was just overwhelming. And so I think there's this massive convergence right now happening between identity and cybersecurity. on the enterprise side, and also a massive convergence happening with identity and fraud on the consumer side. And so it's really exciting. I think the broader folks in the ecosystem are starting to realize that, hey, identity is the perimeter. It's probably the most important thing that we can focus on right now to secure our users. And today we're going to spend our half hour talking about much of that. So let's jump into it.
I was going to expand on that because it is very much true from what I saw when I was there last week, was how much identity was coming back to the top of mind for most of these individuals who attended this conference are really more endpoint EDR, looking at threat data and the next gen SIM stuff that they have coming out from CrowdStrike, but everything kept coming back. As some of us have always known, identity is that security function, and you can start seeing it is now resonating more and more. So that was pretty exciting to see. There's a lot of buzz, a lot of energy. I'm happy to have been exhausted over those 4 days of hanging out with everybody there and seeing that FIDO is coming up more and more, right? So everybody will advocate for MFA, but now we're basically saying, but why, if you haven't done MFA, why would you do that? Just go to FIDO, right? Just go to passkeys. Passkeys make sense. Not RSA hard tokens and soft tokens. Sorry, didn't mean to take a shot at you, RSA, but it's a little annotated.
RSA hard tokens in general. There's plenty of vendors out there who provide them.
Look, I think, as we know, FIDO security keys are the gold standard from a security standpoint for FIDO authentication. But I think the key thing you're hitting on there is, I think our dialogue for so long has been about factors, and that's really the wrong dialogue to have, right? Not how many factors, but why don't we look at the primary factor? And at the end of the day, all these layers we're trying to layer on top of passwords are all things we do to make passwords suck less, and that's really not possible because they're fundamentally flawed. And so with passkeys now, right, you have a primary factor that is inherently unphishable, and the biggest threat out there today is phishing. And you see this. I mean, I don't understand this data you're showing me here. At 4,150, I can't even say it, 4,100% increase in malicious emails over the past couple of years. That's staggering, right? Well, and that's taking advantage of this ongoing dependence we have on a fundamentally flawed primary factor of authentication of passwords. You take that out of the equation, things get better.
I think this number is inclusive of all malicious type of emails, right? So last week, I got an email in my inbox that was from quote unquote McAfee. It said, "Hey Boyan, here is your McAfee, invoice for the next year. It's $600. If you feel that this is erroneous, please call this phone number." And it had my name, it had my address, it had specific information about the type of computer that I even use, right? And so I'm thinking like, man, an AI must have written this because there was just enough contextual information in that email to me that like made me actually open it, right? I didn't obviously call the number because I knew it was phishing or I knew it was a scam, but lots of people would, right? And this is becoming a really big problem. So this number is inclusive of all scams and all that type of stuff. And I think what hackers have just figured out is like, hey, with a simple API call, I can create a perfectly crafted message for whatever scam I'm running to a specific individual. And so that way, this is a massive bump in the number of emails going out. And, I think before ChatGPT, maybe my spam filter would have caught that type of email because it would have not have been specific enough to me.
Yeah, the one thing I will put on this number is it is cited that it is this is /next mid-year assessment of 2024. So this isn't even much more than what we're 9 months deep. So when we take an assessment of what we're going to see in 25 and we look back on 24 as a whole, all the things that you brought up, Boyan, is the wide range of malicious emails, how much are phishing, because that is going to be obviously what's going to have the most fruit. But the scammer side, I think having proper language, because we've been saying this for, I think, at least a year since GVT kind of started hitting it, is that this is all going to be clean text, right? It's all going to be clean context of emails now, without grammar challenges. And it's just going to percolate. I don't see it slowing down. So if we were to bring up, okay, what's the negative of LLMs coming to market? The negative is that this has happened. What's the positive? We have a solution, man. There's already a solution for the phishing part, for the phishing authentication. That the tech is there. Just to kind of kick back to CrowdStrike or the Falcon. I'm like, look, this isn't a tech problem. This is just a business and people problem that we can solve. Not many times can we have a solution on ready for these type of situations, and it's pretty amazing that we have one. I believe already ready to go.
Yeah, on the next slide, we have a stat from the same report, I believe, that's specifically around phishing. And so this was crazy to me, that 850% increase in phishing attacks in the last 12 months. And this is, I brought this point up before, where the industry used to differentiate between phishing and spear phishing. Right? And now there's no reason to make that a differentiation anymore, because that kind of spray and pray approach that hackers used to have, they don't need to do that anymore, right? And because now they can create highly contextualized, highly relevant phishing campaigns to individuals to primarily steal credentials. And that's what we see happening.
So this is a little bit more targeted, Andrew, right? It's not the 4,100, but I mean an increase in malicious emails overall in our inboxes. But now at least we have just an astronomical number on phishing numbers versus just malicious. That's still a huge increase. This is a pretty solid number as well.
No, this speaks to that problem. Yeah, so it's a very solid increase. I mean, it's not 41 times, but it's 8.5 times, which is staggering. But going to your point, it's not just volume; that they're better, they're more sophisticated. Right. And so like Ryan, like you said, we've been talking about this for a year now. So, people are able to deliver, perfectly worded phishing emails in any language to people all over the world and bring them to a pixel perfect knockoff of a website. And so phishing works. It worked before that. Spear phishing had a great success rate because things look real and human nature is to trust. And so that's why it's really important that we put tools in place to protect users from themselves. Because, inside the workforce, I don't believe it should be your employees' jobs to be a shadow IT team to try to snuff out phishing attacks, right? They should be focused on their day jobs. And when, the enterprise or workforce deploys, FIDO authentication and moves away from passkeys, that's exactly what happens. It allows the workers to do their jobs and allows the IT team to do theirs and then focus on other threats other than credential phishing, which is still the leading threat vector out there today.
Yeah, so much of it is one of the things I've seen recently with phishing and even social engineering. I've seen a lot of organizations move any sort of credential related support issue to the security operation control center. It's the SOC. And so what typically for credential related issues, it would go to a IT help desk, which has been optimized for cost effectiveness, right? Meaning it's typically somebody in a different country that costs a lot less. But now that they're moving more of these credential related issues into the SOC, these are highly paid, highly skilled individuals now dealing with credential resets. And all of a sudden it becomes a major cost center to the business because of the accuracy and the sophistication of these attacks. And obviously the increased rate. So I think on the next slide, we have some questions around strategic value to organizations of moving to passkeys in particular and modernizing the way that they do authentication and access. But one of the things I'd like to get your thoughts on, Andrew, is we like to talk about this type of stuff all day long from a security perspective and a usability perspective. But what have you seen resonate with the C-suite at these companies in terms of getting them to move towards passkeys?
Yeah, so I think if you're talking about employee authentication and workforce authentication, and it's very much about threat mitigation. I enjoyed earlier this year. I had a keynote at Identiverse, and we had a panel discussion, and I brought with me the head of authentication from Bank of America, and the most important thing that he said is that he could sleep at night. Right, so he knows that since he's taken passwords out of play, they've moved, I think 95% of their global workforce away from passwords and moving to FIDO-based solutions. He knows that the next big social engineering attack that happens, that he doesn't need to wake up in the middle of the night to worry about that. Right, so it's peace of mind and knowing that your employees are protected, and that your system resources and networks protected from these attacks that continue to grow in volume. When I talk to the C-suite about deploying passkeys for consumers, a couple KPIs always come to mind. Generally people want to have a higher sign-in success rate and a quicker time to sign in, which is throughput basically. And they're finding that, right? So there's the ease of use and the usability of passkeys is helping facilitate commerce. So again, that same keynote discussion I had, I had a gentleman from Amazon who reported, I believe, is around a 14% increase in sign-in success rate versus other forms of authentication. That's a huge number. To be able to increase your sign-in success by by double digits for a company of that size, that's meaningful revenue opportunity. And then the last thing there on that front is that I'm hearing more and more people report back that they're starting to draw a direct line between the increased percentage of customers using passkeys and decreased in fraud because account takeovers are decreasing, things like that. So it's really top line opportunity, bottom line savings, and just better security and hygiene for the workforce.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was at a conference a few weeks ago in Charlotte, North Carolina, all around financial fraud. And one of the audience members mentioned that they had deployed passkeys to their consumers, and they were an insurance company. And they said they saw about a 50% increase in login success for those people who had adopted passkeys. And they were only at about 15% adoption at that point, I believe, but still a measurable impact. And it made me think, like, in those applications where people log in less frequently, like insurance,
Yes,
you're probably going to have more success because people are using that credential far less frequently, and people forget passwords when they don't use them.
absolutely. So the lower volume, lower frequency sign-in is a great use case for passkeys, but it's also it's not just about sign-in success. That means there's less recovery processes being run, right? And account recovery, that's prime grounds for social engineering. Social engineers calling the help desk and manipulating people to take over accounts. So staying out of those flows has the added security benefit as well.
Yeah. So a quick question since we're at the C-suite, let's talk about the CISO in particular. Quick thoughts on how passkeys can help companies with their zero trust strategies.
Is that for Ryan or me?
Let's go with Ryan first, and then you can chime in as well.
Well, I can pontificate forever on this specific topic, but I'll try to kind of narrow it down to some degree. You and I have the same conversation. Like, zero trust is based off of zero passwords, right? Everybody can have their 3 or 4 pillars. If you truly want to have that strategy, and let's really call it the zero trust strategy or initiative, have effect and follow least privilege and all these other kind of models that are associated with zero trust, how do you implement something that has phishing deficits in it to be zero trust? Technically, I don't think you can have a true zero trust program unless you have phishing resistant authentication, which would be passkeys deployed. That should just be more or less your incremental progress as you're taking on this initiative, because people are going to be doing things like deploying SASEs and all these other, vendors and all these other security tools along the way. Just start incrementing passkeys into your user base, which should be a cornerstone of the identity pillar under zero trust. Keeping it high level, because we could talk about this one topic, I think, for an hour and a half alone. So I'll leave it to you, Andrew, if you
No,
want to
I
add on.
totally agree, and that's similar to what I'm hearing. And I think, look, I'm not trying to trivialize, what the lift may be, to get rid of your to stop depending on passwords, right? So this is not about passwordless; it's really about less passwords. Less passwords is the path to passwordless. But companies need to take those first steps, and obviously companies like partners like HYPR can certainly work with companies to help them identify a path towards maybe it's taking some segments of employees off passwords right away and moving others over time. But those first steps are critical. And I agree also, like it's hard to imagine a zero trust and effective zero trust architecture where you're still relying on knowledge-based credentials at its foundation. So yeah, passkeys I think are a way to help accelerate zero trust implementations.
Yeah, I think even the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, has a maturity model with regards to zero trust, and you can't really get into that advanced or optimal stage without a phishing-resistant authentication method deployed. And so, really, anything outside of that is considered legacy, right? Which is really refreshing to see. I think our next set of questions on the following slide are all about how do you balance usability along with security, right? And so one of the questions that we have recently come across and were asked were, give a high level overview of how passkeys can prevent the attacks of like man in the middle. And we've seen tools like Evil Gen X being used to intercept credentials. Andrew, if you want to go first, or Ryan, how can these things be prevented?
I mean, fundamentally, when there's no knowledge-based credential to steal, it takes away that threat entirely. And that's what FIDO is doing. And it's interesting. When I give a talk and show the FIDO security model and the flow, the FIDO authentication flow, that hasn't changed in 12 something years, right? I mean, Brian, you said you've been focused on this, for the longest of any job you've had. This is the same model we've had all along, right? And so it's user-friendly, asymmetric public key cryptography, which I could barely say when I first started talking about it, but now I whisper it in my sleep. No, but it's the same model. But fundamentally, what we're doing is allowing an authenticator to mediate the authentication journey or the ceremony. So instead of having something that only quote unquote, in air quotes, on a server, now it's a key pair. Right? So the public key sits on the server, the private key sits on the device, and it's that encrypted communication between those two things that allows someone to be signed in securely. And there's no way for a man in the middle attack or machine in the middle attack to work because one of those two components won't be there. So even if someone is duped into trying to sign in, they can't. That's the beauty of it all, and that's why. And then that has not changed. The only thing that has been modified, with the advent of passkeys, is the ability for that private key, which used to have to be enrolled for every device or every service. That private key can now be securely synchronized across a credential provider cloud. So whether it's an operating system cloud like a iCloud or Chrome, or whether it's a third-party credential manager like a 1Password or Dashlane, those folks can now manage the passkey so that it's readily available across all your devices. And that's a really strong usability boost. And it's something that we believe, and what we've seen, the results bear out, that was holding back deployments of FIDO at scale for consumer applications.
Yeah, it's also a massive benefit, right? So the way I talk about it is like, hey, if the user is ever typing in a credential at any point in time, chances are it's not FIDO based. Chances are it's not using a passkey, so
Yeah.
it should be avoided. And two is just how big of an asset passkeys can be in terms of that new device situation, right? Millions of people are going to get the new iPhone when it comes out. They're going to download their apps on their new phone, and when they open up that app, they're probably going to be asked to type in a password. With a passkey, you don't have to have that in a situation anymore, because whenever that occurs, a portion of those people being asked to type in a password probably haven't typed it in since the last time they got a new phone, which was a year ago. And a good percentage of them are probably going to pick up the phone and call the IT service desk, which has a hard cost associated with it. So if you can just eliminate that entire usability nightmare, we have customers of ours who used to refer to this as a password Armageddon, because they have tens of millions of customers, and they would find themselves in a situation where, whenever the new iPhone is coming out, they would hire on additional IT support people, like seasonal workers at, Walmart or something, to just deal with password resets.
That's amazing.
And so if that entire set of concerns can virtually be eliminated, it's a massive win to the business.
So that's for enterprises with BYOD authentication, where people are on their
even consumer.
Yeah.
Right, consumer, because for a lot of banking applications in particular, you can't do credential reset through email, right? Because they kind of assume that your email is compromised.
Yeah, it's the thundering herd analogy come password Armageddon, right? Like it's everybody's getting the new device and everybody's making phone calls. So yeah, the interesting thing is that we keep hearing the balancing of security and usability. It's one thing it's been the security conversation that we've had for ever since I've been in the authentication space. It's been a key cornerstone. I think it's through education that users will become comfortable and educated. Like the adoption of passkeys is actually going to be manifested, I believe, in the same way that many got used to using SMS as a second factor. These bigger services, Google, Apple, Microsoft, in our consumer day-to-day lives will get most users primed to this new way. And through some of our work, obviously, enterprises internally will have some experiences. And I think the moment anybody uses a passkey to authenticate, there is no more conversation about usability. It's just we're having these conversations because it's the unknown for many, and I think that the security is just written in. We get the security that we need to solve the first couple of topics that we were just talking about. There is no other technology that has been implemented or deployed in my 20 plus years that has made such a significant impact to a threat.
Yeah, I mean, one of our customers rolled out passkeys, and for those users where they enforced passkeys, they had a 98.5% reduction in account takeover fraud.
Wow.
I mean,
That's amazing.
it sounds like an unbelievable statistic, but when you eliminate the credential theft as a vector, it really does that. So we have a couple minutes here. We do have a slide on navigating passkey adoption that we can just run through real quick, because people had asked hey, what are the things I need to look out for here? So we'll pick on a couple of these and talk about them really quickly, and then we'll wrap it up. But the one that I think is more important than most is have a plan for legacy systems. There's so many instances where we see organizations who are so excited to roll out passkeys. They're so excited to go passwordless, but then there's that one person in the room that's like, well, what about our AS400s? And it's like, okay, let's keep using passwords for those for the time being. Okay, we can put that inside our privileged access management system or whatever else. But for everything else, the 99.9% of other login situations, we can still roll out a more modern, phishing resistant authentication method that people actually like.
Yeah, that's absolutely critical, and I think that's the right perspective to have. Also, the other one of these bullets I think is really important is clear communication and guidance. So education. All right. So if you're moving a workforce over to passkeys, You need to explain why and how and what they should expect, and you need to have your internal IT teams ready. Obviously, for introducing passkeys to your consumers, you need to have your customer support folks ready. You need to explain, like we actually in our design guidelines, we're very explicit and very prescriptive actually about the best way to introduce passkeys to consumers, and that's based on data. That we've done a lot of research on this front to see what messages land most with consumers, what questions do they have, how do you head those off, and so all of that's been rolled into the FIDO design guidelines that we have, which includes this piece on education and communication, which is absolutely critical.
Yeah, I remember the exact same concerns being raised back in 2014 when the iPhone 5S came out with the fingerprint reader. And we were sitting there talking about, like, how are we going to get people to want to use fingerprint-based authentication to log into apps? And there was so much thought that went into it, and guidance and data gathered. And eventually, it just got to a point of critical mass where the consumer started asking, why don't you support this? I'm literally going to use your competitor if you don't.
Yes.
And I think in the next year or two, we're going to get there with passkeys as well, for sure. Ryan, you got a favorite on this list?
Well, I'm definitely not ever gonna do this with you guys again and let you go first and Andrew go second. You guys stealing the ones that I was going with,
I have
but I mean,
4 more to choose from.
yeah. Well, I think if we tie it back, I mean, it is map out the use cases, right? Enterprises are complex, apps are complex. Sit down and jot down what your apps are. I mean, if you're going through a zero trust strategy, if you're going through those things, you need to have an outline. And some of us have seen the world of application sprawl, identity sprawl. There is a point in time we have to bring this back in and we have to kind of rein it in. And then I think that then feeds into the following bullet points that you guys were discussing as well. I think like what I was hearing most is let's educate, let's enable, let's plan accordingly, and then we can execute. Once again, I will advocate. The technology is already there. This is just an implementation and adoption scenario that we're in my book.
Yeah, one of my favorite things is, like, with something like passwordless or passkeys, right? Whenever, as technologists, whenever we're rolling out new stuff, we tend to first put it into the hands of the most technical audience. Well, as techies, like, the favorite thing we like to do is shoot holes in whatever's put in front of us. Right? Like, so what we actually have seen be really successful within enterprises, at least, is in particular, roll this out to your non-technical users. Give it to your HR folks. Give it to the folks in accounting. See what they think. And they're far less likely to sit there and try to look for every little flaw in every little edge case. And they're more likely to just say, hey, this is making me more effective as an employee. It's making me more productive. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I think there was a question around, does passwordless with HYPR still require dependency for enterprises to integrate with their directory as SSO and identity administrators? With HYPR, yes. HYPR does authentication into your existing identity stores. And this is one of those topics where I think it kind of aligns to the top bullet here, which is map out use cases. I think there was another statistic recently that said the average enterprise manages a person's identity in 25 different places. That means you potentially have to worry about authentication into 25 different systems. And so what we really focus on here at HYPR is, how do we make sure that you have a horizontal plane of authentication that is consistent and secure across all your identity stores. So that's really where we focus on the secure and broad integration across IDPs, operating systems, and all these other downstream dependencies that a typical identity environment has. But I think that is it for today. I think we're way past time as usual. Andrew, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody, please, if you haven't already, sign up for Authenticate here in about 3 weeks in beautiful Carlsbad. It is terrific. I recommend you bring a significant other or your family with you. I made the mistake of not doing that last time and doing FaceTime calls with like beautiful palm trees behind me and everybody be like, hey, what the hell? So
We do also, we're selling an in-person experience because it is so awesome, but you can also attend remotely. So if you can't travel, or if you have a newborn on the way or something like that, you need to attend at home, you certainly can do.
Yes.
And so those who register remotely get access to the content. We'll eventually make all the content available, but there's a several month lag on that. So there's a lot of value actually to seeing these case studies and these tutorials. So you can access it remotely as well if you need to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely come visit, because it would be great to see everybody at Authenticate, as well as if you're catching this on YouTube, please like, subscribe, throw some comments, give us some ideas on content, as well as for the LinkedIn audience there. If you got comments, if you guys have ideas on other topics that would, we already have a set schedule, but we're open for anything that's new and fun in the world of cybersecurity. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks. Appreciate it. See you.